It began on a windless night in June 1981, deep within the sandstone labyrinths of Cow Canyon, near the border of Arizona and southern Utah. The desert was silent, bathed in the pale light of a rising moon. 3 campers, a local schoolteacher, her brother, and a geology student from the University of Utah had set up their tents near the dry riverbed to stargaze and photograph meteor trails. Around 2:15 a.m., the first anomaly appeared. A sphere of light, about the size of a small car, rose silently over the horizon, hovering just above the canyon rim. It wasn't a star, a flare, or a helicopter. The glow was too stable, an electric white core wrapped in a faint blue halo. The campers watched, transfixed, as it began to move in perfect geometric patterns, slow, deliberate circles, then sharp, angular turns no aircraft of the time could achieve. At first, they thought it might be military. This was Utah, after all, home to Dugway Proving Grounds and Hill Air Force Base, both known for secret flight testing. But when the light split, literally dividing into 2 identical spheres that danced around each other in synchronized motion, the witnesses realized they were seeing something that defied every rational category. Their cameras, loaded with high-ISO film, failed to capture the brilliance. Each frame came out overexposed, washed in blinding white streaks. The following morning, they hiked into town and reported the incident to a local sheriff, who filed it under Unexplained aerial event. Days later, the local paper ran a small headline: "Campers report mysterious lights over Cow Canyon." Most readers dismissed it. Another desert illusion, another night tricked by the heat. But the story caught the attention of Dr. Helen Armitage, an atmospheric physicist at the University of Utah who specialized in ball lightning and plasma formations. She gathered the witnesses' statements and analyzed their film. Her conclusion surprised everyone. This wasn't a meteorological event, she said. The geometry suggests a controlled flight pattern, something responsive. At the time, the U.S. Air Force was quietly running classified low-visibility tests on electromagnetic propulsion research near remote sections of the desert. Decades later, declassified memos hinted that experimental drones powered by plasma-based propulsion were being tested in secret as early as the late 1970s. But even if those prototypes existed, they couldn't perform instant angular movements or split into symmetrical light pairs. So what did those campers actually see? Satellite logs show no anomalies that night. No aircraft were reported in the area. Yet, 2 separate ranches near Monument Valley, 40 miles south, reported seeing the same blue-white lights moving over the mesas, the same hour, same direction. For years, UFO enthusiasts cited the Cow Canyon lights as proof of extraterrestrial intelligence. But deeper investigation uncovered a more grounded yet equally haunting possibility. Military insiders confirmed that Cow Canyon lies within the magnetic interference corridor caused by overlapping radar fields between Nellis Range in Nevada and White Sands in New Mexico. In rare atmospheric conditions, these fields can interact with high-altitude plasma, creating self-sustaining ionized balls that move as if alive, responding to humidity, static charge, and even sound. To an observer, it would look like something intelligent, watching and maneuvering with purpose. And yet, the phenomenon remains rare, so rare that modern physicists still can't replicate it consistently in a lab. Cow Canyon's lights were never officially explained, but that night marked the beginning of a series of encounters that would stretch across Utah for decades, from Dugway's restricted skies to the salt flats of Bonneville, forming a trail of events that suggested something far larger, far older was awakening in the wilderness. By the late summer of 1983, the strange lights over Cow Canyon had faded into local legend, but not everyone forgot. Among those who kept searching for answers was George Pecoric, a retired Air Force radar technician who had moved to the small desert town of Escalante. George had spent years stationed across the southwest, tracking unknown blips that never made it into official reports. He knew what weather balloons looked like. He knew how radar ghosts behaved. What appeared over Utah's desert that year, he said, didn't fit any of those patterns. In his old pickup truck, George began a personal investigation. He mapped the sightings along fault lines, electromagnetic corridors, and abandoned radar stations left over from the Cold War. His notes filled for notebooks, neat handwriting, coordinates, timestamps, sketches of strange luminous objects. But by October, his search had turned obsessive. Neighbors saw him leave at dusk each night, driving toward the canyon roads that disappeared into Bureau of Land Management land. Then, one night, he didn't come back. The search began 3 days later. His truck was found abandoned 20 miles outside Escalante, doors unlocked, headlights off, and the keys still in the ignition. On the dashboard sat his military-issue binoculars and a cassette recorder. The tape inside had 1 hour of audio, mostly static, wind, and desert insects. But near the end, investigators heard something faint, a low hum, followed by George whispering, "It's here again." Over the ridge, the same light, then silence. No signs of struggle, no footprints leading away. The official report listed him as missing, presumed deceased. But there was one detail omitted from public record. When a park ranger replayed the audio through an oscilloscope, a strange frequency pattern emerged in the background, a pulsing rhythm at 18.98 Hz. far below human hearing range, known as an infrasound signature. That exact frequency had been recorded during multiple UFO events worldwide, including the Belgian wave of 1989 and the Colares incidents in Brazil. Coincidence? Or evidence that whatever George was chasing produced physical, measurable energy? For years, his disappearance became a quiet cautionary tale. But a decade later, hikers found something half buried in the sand near the same ridge, a rusted metal fragment, shaped like a section of an aircraft fuselage but without rivets, bolts, or seams. Its surface was fused smooth, as though melted and cooled in zero gravity. NASA engineers who examined photos of the piece called it unidentifiable. Others suggested it was part of a plasma containment shell, possibly a fragment of an experimental propulsion unit. But no project from that era listed such materials, and no known alloy matched its structure. Local legend transformed George's story into myth, the man who followed the lights and never returned. But the facts tell a darker tale. His notebooks, recovered from his home, revealed coordinates linking Cow Canyon to Skull Valley, just 40 miles from the Dugway Proving Grounds, often called the New Area 51. Inside those notes was one chilling line, circled 3 times. The lights are not random, they're mapping something beneath. In 2007, satellite imagery revealed large circular impressions in the ground near Skull Valley, perfectly symmetrical rings measuring half a mile across, only visible in infrared. The soil showed signs of magnetic residue. Could George have stumbled upon something man-made, a classified geoenergy array, or perhaps something far older buried beneath the Utah desert? By now, the pattern was clear. Every person who investigated the phenomenon too deeply either vanished or fell silent. But one man didn't disappear. He came forward with evidence no one could ignore. A government insider with top-level clearance claimed to have worked directly with electromagnetic anomaly analysis inside Dugway itself. His name was Dr. Marcus Lenz, and his testimony would change the course of the investigation forever. When Dr. Marcus Lenz first appeared in a late-night radio interview in 2009, he used a false name and a scrambled voice. But his words carried the calm precision of someone used to classified briefings. He claimed he had worked as an electromagnetic physicist at the Dugway Proving Grounds between 1998 and 2004, a period when the base quietly expanded underground. According to him, those tunnels weren't just for chemical weapons testing or containment labs. They housed deep environment research facilities, where scientists studied fluctuations in localized gravity and atmospheric plasma phenomena. Dr. Lenz alleged that during one such experiment, something inexplicable occurred. The instruments picked up anomalous energy pulses matching the same low-frequency hum recorded in George Pekorik's cassette 2 decades earlier. At first, the team believed it was interference from solar activity, but the data revealed something different, a repeating modulation pattern resembling a coded signal. It was as if the energy wasn't natural, but intelligent. One night in late 2001, he said their sensors captured an event that triggered automatic lockdown. Surveillance footage showed a blinding flash in an underground test chamber, followed by equipment failure across 3 labs. When power was restored, something had scorched the metallic walls in a perfect hexagonal formation, 6 sides symmetrical, radiating outward like a circuit etched by heat. Security immediately seized the footage. Every scientist present signed an indefinite non-disclosure agreement under threat of imprisonment. But Lenz claimed he had copied fragments of the magnetic readings before the files were scrubbed. He said those readings were identical to signals documented during the 1983 Cow Canyon incident and eerily close to plasma resonance patterns detected above Norway in the Hessdalen Lights phenomenon. Still, what unsettled him most wasn't the pattern itself, it was the reaction from his superiors. Within 48 hours, a special clearance team from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base arrived. Their insignia bore no unit name. They extracted the data drives, dismantled the instruments, and told the staff that the experiment had been terminated. 3 days later, 2 of Lenz's colleagues resigned. One of them, a systems engineer named Dr. Eleanor Voss, vanished shortly after returning to Colorado. Her car was found abandoned off Highway 40, personal belongings still inside. The official report listed voluntary disappearance. Lenz stayed silent for years. Then, after retiring, he began releasing documents through encrypted online archives, schematics, memos, and a fragment of an email chain between Dugway and the Department of Energy referencing Project Albatross atmospheric corridor study. The attachments included infrared photos of circular heat signatures in the Utah desert, the same pattern George Pekorik had mapped by hand 20 years earlier. The deeper researchers dug, the more unsettling the timeline became. Every major UFO flap in the western United States, from Phoenix in 1997 to Utah's Basin Lights in 2003, aligned perfectly with classified test dates from Project Albatross. But there was one catch. Even the base's official logbooks couldn't explain the missing intervals in energy recordings, where sensors registered a power surge that lasted less than a second but consumed more energy than an entire city block. When journalists confronted NASA officials with these claims, they dismissed them as data interpretation errors. Yet, astrophysicists noted a disturbing coincidence. On several of those same dates, magnetospheric anomalies were detected by satellites orbiting near the Sun-Earth Lagrange point. In other words, whatever was happening in the Utah desert wasn't staying on Earth. Lenz ended his final interview with one cryptic statement. "We thought we were studying the atmosphere, but the signal wasn't coming from above, it was coming from below." That one sentence reignited every old theory, ancient structures, hidden bases, even geothermal conduits of unknown origin buried under Utah's salt flats. But when geologists drilled for samples near one of the circular heat signatures, their borehole sensors abruptly failed at 300 feet. The core sample came up glassy as though the rock had been molecularly fused by heat, not of earthly origin. Locals began reporting tremors, short, rhythmic pulses that never registered on the seismic network. Ranchers near Skull Valley described seeing columns of blue light rising silently at night, vanishing into thin air. And then, once again, people started to disappear. First a hiker, then a geology student from the University of Utah. Then a pair of amateur researchers retracing George Pekorik's coordinates. Their phones stopped transmitting at the same GPS point where electromagnetic readings spiked to dangerous levels. The official response was silence. But within the archives of Project Albatross lay a final clue, one that connected Utah's vanishing civilians to something buried far deeper than any of them imagined. That clue would emerge in part for the hidden chamber beneath the basin. October 6, 2020. A 38-year-old woman named Holly Suzanne Courtier steps off a shuttle bus into the vast Red Rock Canyons of Zion National Park in Utah. She's an experienced hiker, recently unemployed, looking to reconnect with nature. She carries only a day pack, a water bottle, and her phone. She tells no one her exact route. By that evening, she is officially missing. For the next 12 days, Zion's cliffs echoed with the sounds of a massive search operation. Helicopters sliced through the air, drones scanned every ravine, and rangers called out her name, hoping for a response. But there was only silence. Then, just as hope began to fade, the impossible happened. She was found, alive, near a remote riverbed, close to the Virgin River. A rescue team discovered Holly. The initial reports described her as being in a near-perfect physical state, but what should have been a moment of pure relief quickly spiraled into a storm of suspicion, questions and theories that still haunt this case today. At first, Courtier's disappearance looked like a tragic but familiar story. A hiker, alone in the wilderness, underestimated the elements. But investigators quickly realized things didn't add up. Her cell phone signal vanished almost immediately after she entered the park. Yet, search teams found no signs of distress and no dropped gear, no footprints leading off a cliff, no evidence of an animal attack. Nothing. Zion is a beautiful but brutal landscape. Daytime temperatures can soar past 90 degrees Fahrenheit, while at night they plummet towards freezing. Water is scarce. For someone to survive 12 days out there without proper gear and a consistent water source is, statistically speaking, almost impossible. And then came the rescue on October 18th. After receiving what they called a credible tip, search teams located her. She was conscious, coherent, and physically stable. The initial story was that she had survived by drinking water directly from the Virgin River. But this is where the official narrative begins to crumble. Wilderness survival experts and even park rangers immediately cast doubt on this claim. The Virgin River, especially in October, is known to be contaminated with cyanobacteria. These toxic algae blooms can cause severe illness, organ failure, and death in humans. Drinking that water untreated for 12 days wouldn't just make you sick, it would be a death sentence. So, what really happened to Holly Courtier? The inconsistencies started piling up almost immediately. Holly's daughter, Kaylee Chambers, told the media her mother was weak but alert, having found shelter and water sources. Yet when the National Park Service was asked for details about her location, her condition, and how far she had traveled, officials were unusually tight-lipped, citing privacy concerns. Days later, the official report was quietly edited. The phrase near-perfect condition was changed to weak and dehydrated. But this contradicted what some first responders were saying off the record. They claimed Holly was standing lucid, and had even refused medical evacuation for hours. James R. Lloyd, a former search and rescue ranger at Zion, didn't mince words. He said, "I've seen dozens of hikers lost for less time, and they come out half dead. You don't walk away from 12 days in that terrain without visible damage." Then came perhaps the most bizarre detail of all, the complete lack of photos. In today's world, where even minor rescues are documented with body cams, phones, and official photography, not a single verified image of Holly's recovery has ever been released to the public. No footage, no ranger body cam, no time-stamped proof of her condition. It's as if it never happened. Within hours, the internet erupted. Online sleuths and armchair detectives began dissecting every piece of information. Some argued that she must have staged the entire disappearance for attention or a GoFundMe campaign that her family had started. Others suspected foul play, pointing to Zion's history of other strange disappearances and search maps that seemed to change or disappear from official records. And of course, a more fringe group proposed something far more bizarre. They claimed Zion's wilderness is connected to secret underground military zones, stretching from Dugway Proving Ground to the infamous Area 51. Maybe, they theorized, Courtier stumbled upon something she wasn't supposed to see. This theory gained traction after users noted that her family briefly thanked unnamed federal search personnel in a social media post that was quickly deleted. But let us set the conspiracies aside for a moment and focus on the most baffling question. Where was she for those 12 days? The official story claims she was near the Virgin River. If that's true, she would have been within earshot of helicopters, drones, and the shouts of rangers. Zion isn't an endless, uncharted wilderness. It's a 230-square-mile park, bordered by highways and ranger outposts. She wasn't found in the deep backcountry. She was discovered less than half a mile from a major trail, one that is used by tourists every single day. How can someone hide in plain sight, be the subject of a massive search, and remain completely undetected for 12 days, only to emerge practically unscathed? There is another, more grounded theory, rooted in psychology. Years before her disappearance, Holly had suffered a traumatic brain injury and reportedly struggled with disorientation under stress. Some psychologists familiar with wilderness cases suggested she might have entered a fugue state. This is a rare dissociative condition where the mind temporarily shuts down parts of conscious memory, causing a person to wander without any real awareness of time or their surroundings. Under this theory, Holly might have instinctively sheltered herself near shaded rocks, perhaps drinking small amounts of filtered runoff from the cliffs, sleeping through the hot days and moving only at night. Her miracle survival then wouldn't be a miracle at all, but a primal testament to the human body's instinct to preserve itself under extreme mental duress. Still, many remain unconvinced. Even in documented fugue state cases, the physical toll is undeniable. Severe dehydration, sunburn, cuts, and infections are common. Yet, multiple rescuers described Holly as hydrated and alert. The pieces just don't fit. After her recovery, Holly Courtier and her family went completely silent. They refused all interviews. There were no press conferences, no book deals, no follow-up statements to clarify the swirling rumors, just an impenetrable wall of silence. By December of that year, the National Park Service had officially closed the case, labeling it resolved. But when local journalists filed Freedom of Information Act requests to see the search logs, the helicopter flight records, and the GPS heat maps of the search area, they were denied. The records were sealed indefinitely, again for privacy reasons. The case faded from the headlines, but it never faded from memory. So, where does the truth lie? It's undeniable that there is no hard evidence to support any supernatural or military conspiracy theories. But what is equally undeniably and deeply troubling is the gaping hole where verifiable facts should be. The conflicting statements, the absence of photos, and the government's unusual refusal to clarify the details of a seemingly straightforward rescue. Whether Holly Courtier experienced a psychological break, orchestrated her own elaborate disappearance, or stumbled upon something truly inexplicable out there in the canyons, one truth remains. In an age of constant digital surveillance, a single person managed to vanish completely for 12 days in one of the most monitored national parks in America. And when she returned, she brought back no memories, no explanation, and no closure for anyone. Thanks for watching. If you have your own theory about what happened to Holly Courtier, let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more explorations into the unexplained. Stay curious. For more than 3,000 years, legends have whispered of a chest so sacred, so powerful, that it could strike down armies and bring kingdoms to their knees. The Ark of the Covenant, described in the book of Exodus as the dwelling place of God's presence among his people. But what was it really? A divine weapon, a mystical energy source, or simply a symbol, misunderstood by centuries of myth? According to Exodus 25, the Ark was built by Moses at God's command, crafted from acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold. It measured roughly 4 feet long and just over 2 feet wide and high. Its lid, the mercy seat, was flanked by 2 golden cherubim whose wings stretched toward one another, forming a throne for the divine presence. Inside were placed the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments, Aaron's rod, and a jar of manna, a testimony to God's covenant with Israel. When the Ark was carried before the people, it symbolized God leading his nation. And when it rested in the Holy of Holies, the most sacred part of the temple, it represented heaven touching earth. Scripture records the Ark's terrifying power. When the Israelites crossed the Jordan River, the waters parted before it. When the city of Jericho fell, the Ark was carried around its walls for 7 days. And when a man named Uzzah reached out to steady it as it was being transported, he fell dead on the spot. But the ancient writers never described these events as technology or weaponry. They were presented as miracle signs that holiness could not be handled casually. The ark wasn't dangerous because it emitted radiation. It was dangerous because it represented the absolute purity of God's presence. It demanded reverence, not technical skill. Over the centuries, myths transformed the ark from a sacred object into a supernatural machine. Some modern writers claim it was an electric capacitor, a radio transmitter to communicate with God, or even an alien artifact linked to a lost civilization. These ideas make for exciting fiction and a great movie plot, but none have any basis in archaeology or physics. The ark was not a power source. It was a portable sanctuary, a throne for the invisible God in a world filled with visible idols. Its power was spiritual, its impact psychological and theological, not technological. It was a physical reminder of an unseen promise. Then, when Babylon invaded Jerusalem in 586 BCE, the ark vanished from history. The Book of Kings records the temple's destruction in detail, but it never lists the ark among the sacred items taken by the Babylonians. From that silence, countless theories were born. Some say it was hidden in secret tunnels beneath the Temple Mount before the invasion. Others point to Ethiopia, where the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church claims to guard it to this day in a chapel in Aksum for centuries. A single monk is said to be the sole guardian of the ark, dedicating his life to protecting it. Archaeologists and journalists have investigated, but no verifiable evidence has ever been produced. If a golden chest rests there, it has never been shown to the world. Centuries after its disappearance, John the Apostle wrote something profound in the book of Revelation. Then God's temple in heaven was opened, and within his temple was seen the ark of his covenant. For theologians, this vision revealed a deeper truth, that the earthly ark was merely a shadow of a heavenly reality. The covenant it represented was never about gold or wood. It was about the reconciliation between humanity and the divine. The true ark, they say, exists not in a hidden cave, but in the presence of God himself. So where does that leave the search? Despite decades of exploration, no authentic remains of the Ark of the Covenant have ever been discovered. Not in Egypt, not in Ethiopia, not in Jerusalem. Excavations near the Temple Mount are strictly limited by political and religious laws, and for good reason, as it's one of the most contested religious sites in the world. Most historians and archaeologists now conclude that the Ark was likely dismantled or destroyed during Jerusalem's fall. Its precious materials would have been melted down or lost to time, yet its memory endured. A symbol so powerful that it has shaped centuries of art, film, and faith. So let's debunk some of the biggest myths. No, the Ark was not an alien reactor. It did not shoot lightning bolts or hum with plasma energy. Its so-called radiation never killed armies. The Bible attributes those victories to divine intervention, while historians point to military strategy, disease, and the power of belief. The mystery of the Ark has endured not because of scientific evidence, but because of what it represents. The timeless human longing to touch the divine, to contain the uncontainable. Ultimately, the Ark's story ends not in destruction, but in transformation. In the New Testament, the idea of the covenant shifts from a physical objective box of gold to a living relationship. This new covenant is described as being written not on stone tablets, but on human hearts. The presence of God, once confined to a sanctuary, is now believed to dwell within those who seek truth and mercy, and that is the real revelation. Perhaps the Ark of the Covenant was never meant to be found again, because its purpose had already been fulfilled. The Ark may be lost to time, buried beneath dust or myth, but perhaps that's how it was meant to be. For what is truly sacred cannot be contained by gold or guarded by men. It lives on not in temples of stone, but in the unseen covenant between heaven and earth. Thanks for joining us on this journey into one of history's greatest mysteries. If you enjoyed this exploration, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. See you next time. In the shadowed corners of the ancient Hebrew world, there existed a sacred object so mysterious, so divine, that it was said to reveal the will of God himself. The Urim and Thummim, two stones placed within the high priest's breastplate, have long been wrapped in myth, speculation, and secrecy. Some have claimed they were tools of supernatural communication. Others insist they were lost technologies, glowing crystals, or divine lights used to channel answers from the heavens. But what is the truth behind these enigmatic artifacts? In the book of Exodus, the Urim and Thummim are first mentioned as sacred instruments of divine judgment, placed within the breastplate of decision worn by Aaron, the first high priest of Israel. Their Hebrew names roughly translate to lights and perfections, but the scriptures give almost no explanation about what they physically were or how they worked. We only know that, through them, the high priest could seek answers from God, a yes, a no, or sometimes, silence. Over time, this lack of clarity led to endless interpretations. Were they gemstones that lit up miraculously? Or were they simply symbolic objects used in ritual prayer? Ancient Jewish scholars described them differently. The historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century, claimed that the 12 gemstones on the priest's breastplate would glow to indicate God's will. But later rabbis disagreed. They said the Urim and Thummim had been lost entirely after the destruction of the first temple. No glowing stones, no divine light, just silence where the voice of heaven once answered. Centuries later, the Urim and Thummim became the center of wild speculation. In the 19th century, some claimed they were ancient communication devices, even linking them to crystal technology, the same kind of speculation that appears in fringe theories about Atlantis and extraterrestrials. Mormon tradition even reinterpreted the Urim and Thummim as instruments used by prophets to translate divine records, a belief often misunderstood outside that faith. But in truth, there is no archaeological evidence that such devices ever existed. No glowing stones, no crystals. Only the biblical and historical descriptions, brief, poetic, and symbolic. So, what do scholars actually believe? Most modern biblical experts agree that the Urim and Thummim were likely lots, small objects, possibly marked stones or tablets used to determine divine will in a ritualized form of decision-making. This method wasn't unique to Israel. In many ancient Near Eastern cultures, priests used similar lots or dice-like stones to interpret divine judgment. The process wasn't magic, it was sacred tradition, a formal way of seeking clarity when human wisdom fell short. In essence, the Urim and Thummim were tools of faith, not technology. Their power was not in the stones themselves, but in what they represented, the belief that divine guidance was still possible in moments of great uncertainty. After the destruction of Solomon's temple in 586 BCE, all references to the Urim and Thummim vanished from scripture. Even in later Jewish writings like the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, the priests lament their absence. By the time of the Second Temple, they were gone. Their disappearance marks not just the loss of sacred artifacts, but the end of an era where divine decisions could be visibly revealed. Some see this as symbolic. Humanity was meant to mature, to move from divine dependence toward moral responsibility. The silence of the Urim and Thummim wasn't abandonment, it was evolution. Let's be clear, despite sensational claims in modern documentaries and on fringe websites, there is no evidence that the Urim and Thummim were alien artifacts, energy crystals, or lost technologies of ancient power. Those theories are built on speculation, not fact. What we do have is profound symbolism, a reminder that faith once sought certainty through signs, and later through understanding. The true mystery of the Urim and Thummim is not how they worked, but why humanity eventually stopped needing them. In the end, the Urim and Thummim remind us of an age when humans reached toward the divine, hoping for a clear and simple answer. But perhaps the silence that followed wasn't a loss. Perhaps it was an invitation to listen for truth not in glowing stones, but within ourselves. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the past. If you found this exploration fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.